Hi everybody, Module 4, Lesson 3, Comparing Quantities with Percents. Students will be able to solve problems involving percent. So yesterday in Lesson 2, we talked about the formula part equals percent times whole. Now, I would like you to add two more lines. Quantity equals percent times whole, and is equals percent of. These are all interchangeable, depends on the situation. Years ago, I just learned it to be is equals percent of. Now it gets a little more specific depending on which situation, but you can always fall back to is equals percent of. We're going to jump down to the bottom of this first page. The members of a club are making friendship bracelets to sell to raise money. Anna and Emily made 54 bracelets over the weekend. They need to produce 300 bracelets by the end of the week. What percent of the bracelets were they able to produce over the weekend? So as I talked about before, I'm going to write my formula. Part equals percent times whole. And then I'm going to substitute in my words. How much did the part is how much they produced. And that's a percent of how much they want, how much they need. Okay. So 54 equals X times the 300. So that is our equation to solve this problem. Now, just like we've always solved equations, we multiply by the reciprocal of the coefficient. So 1 over 300. And we use the property of equality, 1 over 300. What we do to one side, we do to the other. Then I get to pick up my handy-dandy calculator. And I type in 1 divide 300 times 54 equals, and I get an answer of 1800s. What does that mean in this story? They produced 18%. Okay, so that was very much like lesson 2. Now, if we move on to the exercises, we're going to keep in mind what we wrote at the top of our notes. Part equals percent times whole is the same as quantity equals percent times whole is the same as is equals the percent of. So when I look at this, there are 750 students in the 7th grade class. Wow, that's a huge school. And 625 students in the 8th grade class at Kent Middle School. What percent is the 7th grade class of the 8th grade class at Kent Middle School? So is 7th, so I'm going to kind of change this a little bit. 7th grade is what percent of 8th? So what I did is I took the whole story and I just rewrote it as a phrase using is and of. Right, so that is just like when we were identifying what our part is, what our whole is. Just rewrite it with the labels, is and of. Now I can substitute with numbers. There are 750 students in the 7th grade. So 750 is what percent, I don't know, of the 8th grade. 8th grade, the story tells me, is 625. There's my equation. 750 equals 625. Solve the equation. Multiply by the reciprocal of the coefficient. Using the property of equality. Pick up your handy dandy calculator. 1 divide 625 times 750 equals, and I find out 1.2 equals x. What does 1.2 mean in this story? The 7th grade is 120% of the 8th grade. Now let's think about if that answer makes sense. 7th grade, 120%, more than 100%, which means it needs to be more than I started with. Is the 7th grade or the 8th grade larger? In this problem, the 7th grade is larger, which makes sense to have a percent that is greater than 100. The principal will have to increase the number of 8th grade teachers next year if the 7th grade enrollment exceeds 110% of the current 8th grade enrollment. Will she need to increase the number of teachers? What do you think? Will she need to? Thumbs up or thumbs down? So 120% is greater, isn't it, than 110%? So she will or will not? She will need to increase the number of teachers. How's this going for you? We write our equation, we substitute, we solve, and then we answer the question. At Kent Middle School, there are 104 students in the band and 80 students in the choir. What percent of the number of students in the choir is the number of students in the band? So what percent of, because the percent and the of go together, what percent of, where's my word of the choir and, sorry, the formula is equals percent of. So let's fill this in. Is the band. So band is what percent of choir? So the band, what do we know about the band? Why don't you go ahead and substitute the values and solve this problem. Pause the video and give it a try. How did you do? 1.3? The band is 130% of the choir. And does that make sense? If you look back, 104 in the band, 80 in the choir. The band is more, which means that we should have greater than 100%. So number 3, at Kent Middle School, breakfast costs $1.25 and lunch costs $3.75. What percent of the cost of lunch is the cost of breakfast? Why don't you go ahead and set up the equation. Don't solve it yet, just in case you're wrong. But pause the video and set it up. So how did you do? Did you say breakfast is what percent of lunch? $1.25 equals X times 375. So take a look at how I looked at the problem. In green, what percent of lunch is breakfast? And then we go ahead and we solve this problem. Multiply by the reciprocal. It doesn't matter that it's a decimal. One divide 3.75 times 1.25 equals, and I get x equals 0.33 repeated. What does that mean in this story? Breakfast is about, because I'm going to round, so I'm going to say about 33% of lunch. Breakfast is the smaller of the two numbers. We're under 100%. We're less than 100%. That seems to match up. So I know you didn't have a lot to practice on your own, but that's okay. We're going to practice in class. Play the video again if you need to. Jot down any questions because I hope you ask some. See you in class. Bye.